The soil crumbled between Dahlia Watson's fingers as she assessed its quality, the warm May sunshine beating down on her back. After 3 weeks without steady work, this temporary gardening position at the Queensberry estate was a godsend, even if the mysterious owner had never once made an appearance during her interview with the property manager. "This whole south lawn needs to be revitalized," she muttered to herself, making notes on her tablet. With her horticulture degree gathering dust and student loans piling up, she couldn't afford to be picky about jobs. The 6-week contract to rehabilitate the estate's neglected gardens would at least keep her afloat, while she continued searching for a permanent position. Unknown to Dahlia, her every movement was being carefully observed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the mansion's second-floor study. Dominic Quinn adjusted the angle of the security camera on his tablet, zooming in slightly as the new gardener moved with surprising confidence among the overgrown rose bushes. "Mr. Quinn, your conference call begins in 5 minutes," his assistant reminded him through the intercom. Dominic reluctantly set the tablet aside. At 34, he'd built his aerospace engineering firm from nothing into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, but the cost had been steep. After the accident 2 years ago that had left him with severe scarring across the left side of his face and body, he'd retreated from public life, running his empire remotely from this isolated estate. "Tell them I'll be there momentarily," he replied, eyes lingering on the woman kneeling in his garden. Something about her focused determination intrigued him in a way he hadn't felt in years. Dahlia wiped sweat from her brow as she finished cataloging the extensive work needed. The gardens had once been magnificent, she could tell from their bones, but years of minimal maintenance had left them wild and unkempt. Perfect, really. She needed a challenge to sink her hands into. "Miss Watson," the estate manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, approached with a clipboard. "How does it look?" "Salvageable," Dahlia replied with a smile, "but I'll need more than the allocated budget for soil amendments and replacement plantings." Mrs. Rodriguez frowned. Mr. Quinn was very specific about the budget. "Then Mr. Quinn will get exactly what he pays for," Dahlia said, straightening her shoulders. "But if he wants these gardens restored properly, I need proper resources." Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "I'll convey your assessment." In his office, Dominic watched the exchange on his security feed with raised eyebrows. The conference call droned on in his earpiece, but his attention remained fixed on the gardener boldly critiquing his budget. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken so frankly about his decisions, even indirectly. The next morning, Dahlia arrived to find a revised contract on the gardening shed workbench with the budget doubled and a handwritten note. "Impress me, DQ," she smiled to herself. Challenge accepted. Over the next week, Dahlia attacked the gardens with methodical precision. She started with the rose garden, carefully pruning away years of neglect while preserving the century-old specimens. Her days fell into a pleasant rhythm, arriving at dawn when the air was still cool, working steadily through the morning, then taking her lunch beneath a massive oak tree that provided perfect shade. Dominic found himself increasingly drawn to the security feeds during the day. There was something hypnotic about watching her work, the careful consideration she gave each plant, the way she hummed softly while digging, the satisfied smile when she completed a section. His meetings became background noise as he observed her transform his property hour by hour. On Friday afternoon, a sudden spring thunderstorm rolled in. From his study, Dominic watched Dahlia scramble to protect newly planted seedlings with improvised covers before gathering her tools. Instead of leaving, she darted into the gardening shed just as the heavens opened. Without thinking, he reached for the intercom. "Mrs. Rodriguez, please take an umbrella to the garden shed for Miss Watson." There was a pause. "Sir, I've already left for the day. The staff is gone." Dominic glanced at the time, surprised to see it was after 6. He'd been so engrossed in watching Dahlia work that the entire afternoon had slipped away. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and he could see her peering out from the shed, clearly resigned to getting soaked on her way to her car. Before he could reconsider, Dominic grabbed an umbrella and headed downstairs. It would be the first time he'd ventured outside during daylight hours in months. Dahlia was just about to make a run for it when the shed door opened. She stepped back in surprise as a tall man filled the doorway, holding an oversized black umbrella. Her first impression was of height and breadth, broad shoulders beneath a simple gray sweater, dark hair cut short, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to capture all the light in the dim shed. Then she noticed the scarring. It ran from his left temple down his cheek and neck, disappearing beneath his collar. Rather than detracting from his appearance, it somehow enhanced the striking angularity of his features. "You must be Miss Watson," he said, his voice deep and slightly rough as though unused to speaking. "I thought you might need this." Dahlia found her voice. "Thank you, but I don't want to trouble," she paused, registering the signature on the contract she'd seen that morning. "You're DQ." "You're Mr. Quinn." A hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. "Dominic Quinn, yes. I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "No, we haven't," she agreed, trying not to sound accusatory. "I was beginning to think you were a figment of Mrs. Rodriguez's imagination." To her surprise, he laughed a genuine sound that transformed his serious face. "I've been called worse. May I walk you to your car?" The rain drummed steadily on the umbrella as they walked side by side. Dahlia was acutely aware of his proximity, the slight scent of sandalwood and something distinctly masculine. "Your work is impressive," he said as they reached her modest sedan. "The rose garden is already showing remarkable improvement. You've seen it." She asked, then flushed when she realized how stupid the question was. "Of course you have, it's your property." "I observe more than people realize," he said quietly. Something in his tone made her wonder exactly how he'd been observing her work, but before she could ask, he stepped back, allowing her to open her car door. "Thank you for the umbrella," she said, sliding into the driver's seat. He nodded once. "Until Monday, Miss Watson." She watched in her rearview mirror as he walked back toward the house, tall and solitary in the rain. Only when she reached the main road did she realize her heart was racing. The weekend passed with agonizing slowness for Dominic. For 2 days, he found himself wandering to the windows overlooking the gardens, half expecting to see her there, despite knowing it was her time off. The brief interaction in the rain had been more human contact than he'd had in months, and it left him unsettled. Monday morning, he watched from his study as Dahlia arrived, her hair caught in a practical ponytail, wearing cargo pants and a simple T-shirt that somehow looked more appealing to him than the designer gowns he'd once been surrounded by at galas and fundraisers. Impulsively, he pressed the intercom. "Mrs. Rodriguez, please ask Miss Watson if she'd be willing to come to my study to discuss the Eastern Terrace design." 15 minutes later, there was a knock at his study door. When he called for her to enter, Dahlia stepped inside, her expression professional but with curiosity evident in her eyes as she took in the room. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Quinn?" "Dominic, please," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I've been reviewing your plans for the Eastern Terrace." She sat back straight, hands folded in her lap. And I have some questions about your choices. You've suggested replacing the formal parterre with something more naturalistic." "Yes," she nodded, warming to the subject. "The rigid formal style doesn't match the surrounding landscape. I was thinking something inspired by the local ecology, native perennials, ornamental grasses, maybe even a meadow section that would attract butterflies and pollinators." As she spoke, her hands moved expressively and her eyes lit with passion. Dominic found himself captivated not by the words but by the animation in her face. "Show me," he said suddenly, standing. She blinked. "Pardon?" "Show me what you envision, on the terrace itself." 10 minutes later, they stood together on the crumbling Eastern Terrace. Dahlia had overcome her initial surprise and was now gesturing broadly, describing how the space could be transformed. "If we removed these boxwoods and created a flowing pathway here with tall grasses catching the morning light." She moved confidently across the space, and Dominic followed, seeing the garden through her eyes. "You speak about plants as if they're old friends," he observed when she paused for breath. she smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. They are, in a way, more reliable than most people I know. Harsh assessment. Realistic, she countered. Plants don't pretend to be something they're not. They don't hide their true nature. He felt the weight of her gaze on his scarred face. Neither do I, Miss Watson. Dahlia, she corrected softly. If I'm to call you Dominic. Dahlia, he repeated, liking the feel of her name. Like the flower, appropriate. My mother was a botanist, she explained. I never stood a chance at having a normal name or a career that didn't involve dirt under my fingernails. And is that what you want, normalcy? She considered the question with surprising seriousness. No. I want authenticity, purpose. She gestured to the overgrown space around them, the chance to create something beautiful and lasting. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. Then Dominic looked away, uncomfortable with the unfamiliar feelings stirring inside him. I've taken too much of your time, he said formally. Please proceed with your vision for the terrace. I'll have Mrs. Rodriguez adjust the budget accordingly. Before she could respond, he turned and walked back to the house, leaving Dahlia staring after him, confused by the abrupt shift in his demeanor. Over the next 2 weeks, their interactions fell into an unexpected pattern. Dominic would find reasons to consult with her about the garden's questions about plant selections, concerns about irrigation systems, discussions about the history of the property's landscape. Each conversation would begin formally, but inevitably drift into more personal territory until something a silence that stretched too long would cause Dominic to retreat behind his professional facade. Dahlia found herself looking forward to these encounters with an eagerness that surprised her. There was something compelling about Dominic Quinn that went beyond his obvious physical attractiveness or his wealth. In glimpses and fragments, she began to piece together a picture of the man behind the scars and the seclusion. He was brilliant, that much was obvious from how quickly he grasped the technical aspects of horticulture, she explained. He was also deeply knowledgeable about art, literature, and history, often making references that revealed a well-educated mind. But there was a sadness to him, a wariness in how he held himself apart, as though expecting rejection. One afternoon, as they walked through the partially restored rose garden, Dahlia finally gathered her courage. May I ask you something personal? Dominic tensed visibly but nodded. Why did you hire me when you clearly know enough about gardening to do this yourself? These roses have been recently pruned and not by me. He looked surprised, then gave a small smile. You noticed? I notice everything about plants, she said simply, including when someone else has been caring for them. He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Then he sighed. Gardening was my mother's passion. After she died, I let it go. It seemed disrespectful somehow to continue without her, but recently I've found myself drawn back to it. He ran a hand along a newly budding rose stem. Night is easier for me, no curious eyes. The admission hung in the air between them, the first truly personal thing he'd shared. Dahlia felt its weight, the trust it represented. The accident? She asked gently, his jaw tightened. 2 years ago, a helicopter malfunctioned during a test flight for one of my company's new designs. The pilot died, I survived, but he gestured vaguely to his face and left side. I'm sorry, she said, reaching out instinctively to touch his arm. He flinched slightly but didn't pull away. Don't be, I'm one of the lucky ones. Is that why you stay hidden away here, because of the scars? His blue eyes met hers, searching. Partly, the media attention was intense, but it's more than that. The accident changed how I see the world, how I see myself in it. And how do you see yourself? As someone who failed, he said quietly. The pilot who died had a family. A daughter who'll grow up without her father because my design wasn't perfect. Dahlia's heart ached at the burden he carried. Perfection is impossible, in gardens and in life. The most beautiful plants often grow from devastation, forest fires, floods. Nature understands that destruction sometimes precedes rebirth. He looked at her, then with an expression she couldn't quite interpret, wonder, perhaps, or a kind of hunger. You're not what I expected when Mrs. Rodriguez suggested hiring a temporary gardener. No, she smiled slightly. What did you expect? Someone who wouldn't challenge me. Someone safe. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Dahlia felt her pulse quicken as he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the varying shades of blue in his eyes. "And am I unsafe, Dominic?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, his gaze dropped to her lips. "Extremely." The moment stretched, taut with possibility, then shattered as Mrs. Rodriguez's voice called from the terrace, announcing the arrival of documents requiring his immediate attention. Dominic stepped back, the spell broken. "Excuse me," he said formally, and walked away, leaving Dahlia among the roses, her heart racing and her mind in turmoil. That night, a spring storm lashed the estate with unexpected ferocity. Dahlia, worried about the newly planted saplings on the western edge of the property, drove back after dinner. The security gate opened automatically when she arrived. Dominic must have been notified of her approach. The rain was relentless as she worked by the beam of her flashlight, staking the young trees and providing additional support against the wind. She was soaked to the skin within minutes, but focused entirely on protecting her work. "You're going to catch pneumonia," a voice called through the downpour. She turned to see Dominic approaching, wearing a rain jacket and carrying a large umbrella. Without the usual distance between them, without the careful control he typically maintained, he looked different, more approachable, more human. "The Japanese maples wouldn't survive this wind without support," she explained, gesturing to the slender trees. "They're too valuable to lose." "More valuable than your health." He moved closer, holding the umbrella over her, though it did little good given how drenched she already was. "It's just water," she said with a smile. "I won't melt." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, the concern evident in his expression catching her off guard. Thunder followed immediately, shaking the ground beneath them. "That's too close," he said firmly. "Come inside, now." Before she could protest, his hand was on her elbow, guiding her toward the house. The warmth of his touch, even through her soaked jacket, sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with the lightning. For the first time, Dahlia entered the main house beyond Dominic's study. Despite its grandeur, it had a hollow feeling, beautiful but unlived in, like a museum after hours. Dominic led her through the massive kitchen, grabbing a towel from a drawer and handing it to her. "You need dry clothes," he said, his eyes carefully averted from the way her wet shirt clung to her body. "I'll find something." While he disappeared upstairs, Dahlia took in her surroundings. The kitchen was state-of-the-art but showed little sign of use. A single coffee mug sat in the dish rack. One place setting on the counter, ready for the next meal. It spoke volumes about his solitude. He returned with a bundle of clothing. "These might be enormous on you, but they're dry," he said, handing her a soft gray sweatshirt and flannel pants. "The bathroom is through there. I'll make some tea." When Dahlia emerged, the sleeves of his sweatshirt rolled up multiple times and the pants cinched tight at her waist. She found him standing at the window, watching the storm. Two steaming mugs sat on the kitchen island. "Thank you," she said, taking a seat on one of the bar stools. "For the clothes and the tea." He turned, and something shifted in his expression when he saw her wearing his clothes. He cleared his throat. "You're welcome. How are the gardens coming along, beyond tonight's emergency?" They slipped into conversation about the restoration progress, the easy exchange they'd developed over the weeks. As the storm raged outside, Dahlia felt a curious sense of safety in this vast, empty house with this complicated man. "Why aerospace engineering?" she asked during a lull. "What drew you to it?" A genuine smile touched his lips. "The impossible challenge of it, making something heavier than air fly, defies logic, defies gravity itself, yet we've mastered it." "You've mastered it," she corrected. "Your company's innovations are legendary." He looked surprised. "You've researched me." "Of course I have," she admitted. "Wouldn't you be curious about the reclusive billionaire whose gardens you're restoring?" "Billionaire," he repeated with a slight grimace. "A label that tells you nothing important about who I am." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I wanted to hear it from you." Their eyes met across the island, and the air between them seemed to thicken. Dominic's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, a question in them. Dahlia's heart raced as she set down her mug and slowly walked around the island until she stood directly before him. Up close, she could see the intricate pattern of his scars, the way they followed the contours of his face like a map of rivers. Without breaking eye contact, she lifted her hand and gently traced the line of scarring from his temple to his jaw. He remained perfectly still, barely breathing, as if afraid any movement would shatter the moment. "Dahlia," he whispered, a warning and a plea in her name. "I see you, Dominic," she said simply. "Not your money, not your scars, you." Something broke in his expression, a wall crumbling, revealing vulnerability beneath. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips brushed against hers. The kiss was tentative at first, questioning, then deepened as she responded, her hands moving to his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unevenly, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you kneeling in my garden that first day," he confessed. Dahlia smiled. "Is that why you've been watching me all this time?" He drew back slightly, a question in his eyes. "The security cameras," she explained. "They move when I move, I noticed the second day." A flush crept up his neck. "I'm sorry, that must seem like you were curious about me," she finished for him. "Like maybe you've been as drawn to me as I've been to you." His eyes darkened. "More than you know." This time when he kissed her, there was nothing tentative about it. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as she wound her fingers through his hair. The storm outside mirrored the one breaking loose within them, wild, elemental, unstoppable. Later, as they sat together on his rarely used living room sofa, her head resting against his shoulder, Dominic spoke into the comfortable silence. "Your contract ends in 3 weeks. Dahlia felt a tightening in her chest. "Yes." "What happens then?" She sat up to look at him directly. "That depends on whether this," she gestured between them, "is just a momentary connection or something you want to explore further." Dominic took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I haven't let anyone close since the accident. I convinced myself it was better that way, safer for everyone. Then you arrived with your certainty and your fearlessness, making beauty from neglect." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "You make me want to try again, to step out of the shadows." "It won't be easy," she warned. "The world outside these gates isn't always kind." "I know," he said, "but maybe with the right person beside me it would be worthwhile." The simple honesty of his statement touched her deeply. "One step at a time," she suggested, "starting with dinner." "A proper one, not just tea during a thunderstorm." He smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Tomorrow night I can cook. You cook?" she asked, pleasantly surprised. "Another thing my mother taught me alongside gardening," he said, "though I'm probably rusty at both." "Then we'll figure it out together," Dahlia said, leaning in to kiss him again. Over the following weeks, the gardens weren't the only things flourishing at the Queensberry estate. Dominic began joining Dahlia during her work hours, learning to garden in daylight again, gradually growing more comfortable with his scars being visible. Their dinners became a nightly ritual, sometimes in his formal dining room, sometimes picnics in the newly renovated garden spaces. Slowly, Dominic began reconnecting with the world beyond his estate. First through video calls with his management team, then carefully selected in-person meetings. Each small step was a victory, made possible by Dahlia's unwavering support and the quiet strength he drew from her presence. As her contract neared its end, they sat together on the eastern terrace, now transformed into the naturalistic paradise she had envisioned. Wildflowers swayed in the evening breeze, their colors catching the golden light of sunset. "I received a job offer today," Dahlia said, watching his face carefully. "The botanical gardens in the city, it would be permanent with good benefits." Dominic's expression remained neutral, though she felt his hand tighten slightly around hers. "That sounds perfect for you. When would you start?" "I haven't accepted yet," she said. "I wanted to talk to you first." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I would never ask you to give up an opportunity like that." "I know," she smiled. "That's one of the reasons I love you." The words hung in the air between them, the first time either had spoken them aloud. Dominic's eyes widened slightly, then softened with emotion. I love you too, he said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue but no less sincere for it, which is why I have a counter-proposal. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Dahlia's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a ring with a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. Green, like the gardens where we found each other, he explained softly. Dahlia Watson, these past weeks have shown me what life can be when shared with someone who sees past surfaces to what lies beneath. I don't want to lose you when your contract ends. Are you offering me a permanent position as your gardener? She teased, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. He laughed, the sound free and unguarded in a way it hadn't been when they first met. I'm offering you a permanent position in my life. As my partner, my confidante, my wife if you'll have me. It's fast, she whispered, though her heart had already decided. Too fast, he asked, vulnerability evident in his question. She shook her head, smiling through her tears. Just fast enough, yes, Dominic, yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime together. Dahlia reflected on how she'd arrived at this estate just weeks ago, desperately in need of work, unaware that the reclusive billionaire watching from his windows would become the love of her life. The gardens around them continued to bloom, a testament to what care and patience could nurture back to life, not unlike the man who held her, who had emerged from his isolation to find love growing in unexpected places. 5 months later, they were married in those same gardens, now fully restored to their former glory. Dominic, standing tall in the sunshine without hiding his scars, watched as Dahlia walked toward him along a path lined with the roses they had tended together. As she reached him, radiant in a simple gown adorned with fresh flowers, he marveled at how one temporary position had led to a permanent transformation of his gardens, his life, and his heart.